Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast, the show that brings you latest insights, thought leadership and stories from across the global mining industry. I'm joined again by Alan Carter, the CEO of Cabral Gold, to discuss the company's flagship Cuiu Cuiu gold project in Brazil and the strategy driving its development. With a strong background in obviously geology and extensive experience operating in Brazil, Alan brings a deep insight into both technical and commercial aspects of advancing gold projects within the region. In this conversation, we're going to cover Cabral's two-stage development approach, which differentiates Cuiu Cuiu from other gold projects and the recent share price momentum. We're also going to explore why Alan believes Cabral represents a compelling investment opportunity at current levels and what investors expect in terms of upcoming news flow and key catalysts over the next few months. So let's welcome Alan to the podcast. How you doing, Alan?
I'm doing well, Rob. Thanks for having me on again. It's nice to be back.
Yeah, I think this is probably your fourth, maybe even fifth episode in 7 years as I've been running these. So I think a lot of our audience would have listened to one of those episodes. But if some of our newer listeners haven't heard the previous episodes, just wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your career. Obviously, you're a geologist by trade, and how your career sort of developed to what it is today.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Well, I grew up in the UK. I studied geology, and I got a degree in geology, and then I did a PhD on a gold deposit in Zimbabwe. And then I joined Rio Tinto at a university, and I lived in South America for 10 years. So Rio moved me around various countries. I was in Bolivia, Ecuador, Peru, Argentina. I transferred from Rio to Billiton, and which then got swallowed by BHP. And BHP moved me, after 10 years living in South America, BHP moved me up to Vancouver to do business development work. And so that work exposed me to a lot of junior companies, Rob. So I had the major background. I've obviously got the academic background in gold. But what really turned my crank was meeting all these junior companies, and I met lots of entrepreneurs. And after a few years with BHP doing deals for BHP, I decided that I would probably be better off on the other side of the table. So 20 years ago, I branched out and set up my own company. And I've been involved with several junior companies, had some success, notably myself and a geologist friend of mine, Dennis Moore. We identified a very, very early stage gold project in Brazil 20 years ago called Tocantinzinho. That at the time we identified it and we optioned it. There was no drill holes into it, but we'd seen some veins sticking out of the ground on surface. And that project 20 years on is now Brazil's third largest gold mine. So last year produced about 180,000 ounces or so of gold. So it's gratifying to have been involved in an early stage discovery like that. I've obviously been involved in a few other things along the way too. I think I've been directly involved in 4 grassroots gold discoveries in Brazil, but that so far is the largest one. So, yeah, that's basically my background. I'm fluent in Spanish and Portuguese, and most of my career I've been living and working in South America.
Obviously, you mentioned that you've worked across various countries in obviously South America. What's different with obviously mining in Brazil compared to some of the other regions in South America where you've worked? And I suppose this is really more to people who haven't worked across South America previously. What would you say is different in Brazil that's different to some of the other regions?
Well, look, Rob, Brazil, if you look at South America as a whole, there's obviously a number of countries there. Brazil is by far the largest country. It's got because it's so large, there's a number of different sort of rock types and geological terrains there. It's a major producer of iron ore. As you know, the world's largest iron ore mine, Carajás, is in Brazil. It's a significant producer of gold and copper, and it has a very well-developed mining industry. It's also a big producer, by the way, of aluminium. So it's got a well-developed mining industry. You can work there 12 months of the year. there is a wet season, but it's not like many places like northern Canada where you're sort of frozen out for 6, 7, 8, 9 months in some cases, and you can't get onto your project. We can drill and work on our projects for 9 months of the year. It's got well-developed infrastructure in terms of mining and lots of support companies, drill companies, laboratories, et cetera, et cetera. So, but the potential in Brazil, I think, is enormous. Most of the country is covered by, soil and sediments. So you've got to look pretty hard under that cover. But it has enormous potential. And I think the fact that most of the world's largest mining companies, including Rio Tinto, BHP, and others, and Vale, of course, which is a very large company, which is a Brazilian company, mining company. I think the fact that they're all active in Brazil speaks volumes. So, good place to be if you're a mining company, not necessarily a large company, but also as a junior company. There are lots of opportunities out there in lots of commodities. You're seeing a lot of interest now in things like lithium and rare earth elements, but the gold industry is well developed, and it's a good place to be.
Before we start speaking about Cabral Gold, obviously you've been in exploration, you're now in development, and you will be going into production. How have you found that experience? And was it what you imagined from many years ago when you started the company?
Yeah, well, in the formative years of my career, I've worked on mines. So the transition from an exploration company to a development company, I knew some of what to expect, but it has been a challenge. I think the biggest challenge has been just getting the right people in the right place. As I said, we've been successful on the exploration front, but development and production is something different. So you need to sort of like recognize what what additional people you need with additional skills that you need to get in, and get people in place that are prepared to sort of like pursue your vision. So it has been challenging. It's been educational, and it's great in terms of not just growth of the company in terms of the financial metrics, but in fact, we're all learning a lot as we go along here. So I've spoke to you before about the fact that most exploration companies are funding their exploration efforts by diluting their capital structures. So they keep issuing shares, more shares and more shares. And the problem with that is you don't have any control over your share price. So it depends largely on external factors and what's happening in the capital markets. So that can lead to quite a lot of dilution. And we want to get off that, what I call hamster wheel, and start self-funding all of our exploration work going forward. And so that's what we're planning on doing. So it's a little bit different model to most small mining companies.
And this is, I suppose, this question is more around obviously the geologists out there. Obviously, you were a geologist, with obviously boots on the ground. Did you ever envisage of actually building a mining company and building a mine?
Yeah, it's always been something that I've wanted to do. It's great making a discovery, but really, I've always wanted to actually build on those discoveries and move things forward into production, and that's what we're doing. So yeah, it has been something that's been very important to me for some time.
So speaking about Cabral Gold, I just wondered if you can give us an update on the company. And I suppose we spoke probably 18 months ago. So I just wondered if you can just give us an overview of the company and I suppose the last 12 to 18 months, what has happened.
Yeah, sure, Rob. Well, as you recall, we have a gold project in northern Brazil in the state of Pará. Pará is a big mining state in Brazil. Our project is very close to that mine I mentioned earlier, Tocantinzinho. So we're just along the same fault structure to the northwest. Since we last spoke, well, maybe I should just go back a little bit. The project we got it's actually a whole district. It's an entire gold district, Rob. We're in a region called the Tapajós, which is the site of the world's largest ever gold rush. And I think most people have never even heard of it. I mean, most people have heard of the California gold rush. Well, the gold rush that happened in the Tapajós in the 1980s was 10 times larger than the California gold rush. And during that gold rush, there was an estimated 20 to 30 million ounces recovered from a whole series of streams and rivers within this region at 100 different places. Now, Cuiu Cuiu was arguably the largest placer camp. So there's 2 million ounces of gold came out of the streams just at Cuiu Cuiu. And we are hunting the primary sources for all that alluvial or placer gold. So now our gold project has been weathering over millions and millions of years. So that's why there's a lot of gold in the streams. But the actual sources, the nearby sources in the primary rock, have been weathering over this time. And that weathering process that's happened over millions of years has formed a sort of a layer of mud. And we call it saprolite. That's a technical term, but it's basically mud right on top of the rock. And this mud has a significant amount of gold in it, which is weathering from the underlying gold deposits in the rock underneath. Now, this saprolitic mud is 60 meters thick. That weathering profile, the depth of that weathering profile is quite unusual. That opens up an opportunity for us. So to basically look at developing a two-stage production strategy for the development of our project or our district. Phase one is currently under construction, as you're aware, but phase one is funding the development of and the mining of that saprolitic mud layer, getting into cash flow, and then using that cash to actually build out and develop the second, much larger phase, which is to mine the underlying hard rock material. So phase one has been funded since we last spoke. So we did a pre-feasibility study that was done by Asenco. We published that in July. We then went out and raised $40 million via a gold loan. There was no dilution. So we borrowed about 350 kilograms of gold from our largest institutional shareholder. We obviously got to pay that gold back, but there was no share offering as part of that financing. We made a construction decision in November 2025 last year, and we're building the phase one operation. Now, the phase one operation is a 3,000 ton a day heap leach project to mine and process this mud material. That should be producing 25,000 ounces in the first year, probably going to average around about 20,000 ounces a year, at least initially. And the all-in cash cost for that operation will be around about $1,200 an ounce. It probably will be a little bit higher now that the fuel prices have risen, but $1,200 to $1,300 an ounce. So even with the pullback in the current gold price, it should be a very, very profitable starter operation. I think 25,000 ounces, gold's at, as we speak, about $4,500 an ounce. So this thing should have at least a $3,000 margin on it. So the big prize, however, is actually scoping out that much larger second step. But that strategy, that two-stage development strategy, start with an initial starter operation, relatively modest. There's only $40 million of capital that we are spending on developing this phase one. Is quite unusual. Most exploration companies work on, going straight to what would be our phase two and funding that. But in the process, as I said, they suffer quite a lot of dilution to get there, if they get there, and most don't.
Yeah. I suppose following on from that, what's the reasons behind obviously having a two-stage development strategy for the project? And I just wonder if you just go into a little bit more detail around that.
A lot of it was market cap, Rob. I mean, a lot of companies said they have a 50 million, 100 million market cap, and they've done a study, a PA study that suggests they need $500 million. Well, companies with that kind of market cap have no chance of raising that kind of money. So we've sort of scoped phase one to be of a size that we could fund. And so, as I said, it was only $40 million US sort of cost for phase one. It wasn't $400 million. Phase two will probably be $400 million plus. But so that was a big part of it, was not getting too far ahead of our skis, if you like, in terms of, not pursuing a strategy that was unattainable in terms of, trying to develop a massive project that we had no chance to fund. As I said, we were fortunate in that we have got this 60 meters of weathered material, which is quite unusual, which allows us to sort of contemplate an initial starter operation. And just to put it in simple terms, because we're only mining and processing mud material, the mining costs are very low. We're not drilling and blasting rock. We're basically just getting excavators in and moving this what is basically essentially is earth. And then once you get to the processing plant, well, most mines, particularly gold mines, are crushing and grinding rock in order to liberate the gold. Well, we're not crushing and grinding rock because Mother Nature's done all the work for us over millions of years. We've got to add a little bit of cement, but the processing costs for this saprolitic mud material are very, very low. So, but those are the main reasons that we're pursuing a two-phase development strategy. A lot of it was around the capital cost and being able to fund the development of something that was, attainable given our market cap. As I said, we were fortunate in that we had this thick layer of weathered mud material. And so far it's going very well. It is a bit of an unusual strategy, as I said before. So, but we're on track and we're on budget. We're on budget, we're on schedule for our first gold pour in the latter part of this year, Q4.
What sets the Cuiu Cuiu project apart from other gold projects? And if we look at obviously grades, scale, cost profile, etc.
I think several things. Look, I've spent my career exploring for gold, copper, diamonds, all sorts of things. I've been fortunate enough to be involved in 4 gold discoveries in Brazil and several others elsewhere in South America. But I think the thing that really sets Cuiu Cuiu apart is it's got such a massive placer footprint or alluvial footprint. There was so much gold came out of the streams at Cuiu Cuiu. We've probably got, well, I know we've got about 17.8 square kilometers of tailings from those alluvial operations from 40 years ago. So it's got a very big footprint. It's also got a very, very large golden soil anomaly. So what we did at Cuiu Cuiu was the same as what we did at Tocantinzinho 20 years ago. We did a soil survey. At Tocantinzinho, which, as I said, is the 3rd largest gold mine in Brazil, we identified a golden soil anomaly in the soil about 1 kilometer across. The same equivalent golden soil anomaly at Cuiu Cuiu is 7 kilometers across. We've just drilled a couple of weeks ago a drill hole that came back with 9.5 meters at 87.4 grams a ton. That's the best drill hole that I've ever been associated with in my career. That's about 830 gram meters. So that would be equivalent to drilling a drill hole with 830 meters averaging 1 gram. It's kind of pretty unheard of. There are 1 or 2 companies out there that in the last 10 or 20 years have drilled similar numbers, or better, actually. I'm not saying it's the best. It's not. But it is a very, very unusual hole. And the more important thing about that is that it was drilled 3 kilometers away from the nearest known gold deposit at Cuiu Cuiu. We've got several gold deposits there already. This is one of several new discoveries. But the best hole that we'd drilled until about 2 weeks ago over the entire property was about 220 meters at 2 grams. So about 440 gram meters. This hole at Jeremincima was quite stunning. And was, by the way, way better than anything that any drill holes that I'm aware of that have ever been drilled at Tocantinzinho as well. So I think there's a few things. It's got a very large historic placer gold field there. It's a very large golden soil anomaly. We've got 50 targets here where we found gold outside of the known deposits. In 2022, when we last updated the resource, which is 1.2 million ounces, that's still valid. It's still current, 1.2 million ounces. It's looking a little bit out of date now, and we've done a lot of drilling since then, but we've got 50 other targets outside the known gold deposits where we found gold. And so that drill hole I just mentioned to you, actually, we have boulder fields on the eastern part of the property that are averaging, in a couple of cases, one boulder field is averaging 75 grams a ton. And these are boulders just lying around on surface. There's another one, which is 5 kilos from that, which is averaging 91 grams a ton. Gold, not silver, Rob. So there's some really, really stunning kind of numbers coming out of this district. As you know, I'm a big shareholder. I put $2 million of my own money into the company, which for me is an awful lot of money. So I am very, very heavily invested. I'm aligned with my shareholders, and we're on a mission. We're on a mission to find out just how much gold there is in the primary rock and also the saprolitic mud within this district. There's a lot of work to do. We got 3 rigs drilling, so we've got a lot of work to do. But there's a lot of exploration going on in parallel with this phase 1 build that we were just talking about.
Yeah. Why has the share price gone up more recently over the last few weeks? Is there anything behind the movement?
Well, it's backed off a little bit this past week because of the geopolitical tension in the Middle East, but yeah, it has been moving up, and look at the price of gold has been going up. To be fair, but I think there are 3 main reasons in our case why the share price has been moving up. Number one, we are getting closer and closer to production from this phase 1 project that I mentioned to you. As I said, we should be producing gold in the 4th quarter of this year. So with every day that passes, we de-risk in this project. We put out a press release a couple of weeks ago that gave an update, and we're on schedule and on budget for that. So I think that's one of the reasons, getting very close to being a junior gold producer. The second reason is I'd suggest is that we were granted on the 10th of March our LP for the full mining license. That is the most significant permitting step for any mining project in Brazil. The LP is massive. We started the process to acquire the LP license back in 2018. So it takes a little bit of time. In Brazil, it's just the same as, permitting a project in the US or Australia or anywhere else. It just takes some time. So getting the LP for the full mining license allows us to expand the phase 1 project. But it also means that the second phase project, there's a very clear permitting route on phase 2, which is a much bigger second step to mine the hard rock material. So anybody who's involved with mining in Brazil will know the importance of getting an LP. It is a very big deal and takes some time. It involves numerous government agencies, lots of different stakeholders, the local communities. There are a lot of people that have to be consulted. There are a lot of reports that have to be, and studies that need to be done that go into getting that LP. So that was a big deal. And the share price went up on the back of that when we put that news out on the 10th of March. And I think the third reason is that hole that I mentioned. A couple of days later, we'd put out that result at Jeremy-Sima, which, as I said, was 9.5 meters at 87.4 grams a ton, and within that there was 2.9 meters at 285 grams a ton gold. So very, very high grade intercept, unprecedented in our case, very, very unusual across our industry.
And if you put your investor's hat on, why do you think Cabral Gold is obviously a good investment at these current levels?
I think there's several things. I think management is key. When I invest in mining companies, I always look very, very closely at the management. It's probably the 3 most important things are management. In our case, we've got a track record in Brazil. As I said, we've been involved in 4. I've been involved with 4, but the team's been involved with 5 grassroots gold discoveries in Brazil in the last 25 years or so. We've got our own money into this. I've put in $2 million of my own money into this, which, as I said, is a significant amount of my net worth. So we are aligned with shareholders, and we have been executing on what we've promised, and we will continue to do that. I think management's very, very important when you're contemplating investing in a publicly listed mining company. I think the second thing is, as I said earlier, is the project's very special, right? It is right next door to Brazil's 3rd largest gold mine. We're on the same fault structure. Our claims are actually contiguous with theirs. It's very, very unusual project, and it's just because it's so large, and we control the entire district, Rob. So back in 2022, we had discovered 3 primary hard rock gold deposits within the property. We now believe we have 6 or 7. So we continue to make discoveries. And as I said, outside of the known gold deposits, there are about 50 other targets. We mentioned these boulder fields, but we've got some very good drill holes and some very good trenches on several other targets at Cuiu Cuiu. So We're in a good jurisdiction. We can work here 12 months of the year, so there's constant news flow. Um, I think, and we're very close. Obviously, as we said, we're very close to achieving commercial production on phase one. So, which will mean there should be no more dilution once we hit commercial production. And at the current gold price, as I said, we should be doing 25,000 ounces in the first year. The current gold price, that will equate to about 75 million US dollars pre-tax. So that's just on the phase one project. And then we've got this much bigger phase two project coming along behind it. So lots of news coming out. We've got 3 rigs turning. I think all these things sort of add up to, obviously I'm biased because I'm the CEO and founder of the company, but as I said, I got my own portfolio of junior companies and I have my own checklist of things that I look for, and we certainly tick all the boxes for me as an investor. So good jurisdiction, it's a great place to be.
Yeah. And lastly, what's the outlook for the sort of next 6 to 12 months, and what should investors, I suppose, expect in terms of news flow and potential catalysts as the year goes on?
Yep, good question. Lots of drill results. As I said, we have 3 rigs turning. We've got a 4th one that's on its way to site. So constant stream of drill results. I can't promise our investors or anybody contemplating an investment in the company that we're going to keep knocking out drill results of 9.5 meters at 87 grams, but I can promise a constant flow of drill results. Obviously, achieving commercial production is going to be massive for us sometime in the 4th quarter. So we will be putting out regular updates. The project's now just around about 60% complete, Rob. So we've got several more months to go, but we are getting close to commercial production. So I think we'll get a re-rate when we get into commercial production. I certainly hope so. And then the other thing is this resource estimate that I mentioned to you that was last done in 2022 is somewhat out of date now. So we need to update that. As I said, we've made several discoveries. We've made 4 main discoveries since 2022. So updating the resource by the end of the year is definitely on the agenda. And that would also be a big catalyst. I think those would be the main catalysts for us.
Yeah. Alan, really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on the podcast again, sharing obviously your story. Give us an update, obviously, on Cuiu Cuiu, and obviously working towards that first production in Q4 this year. And obviously, wish you well as the year goes on. If our audience wants to reach out to you, if they've got any questions, follow the story, obviously follow the news flow as well. How can they get in contact with you? And the social media platform channels, what ones are you on?
We're on, I think, just about all of them. Cabral Gold is the name of the company, Rob. So CABRAL. And anybody can email me at Alan, ALAN, @cabralgold.com, and I'll respond.
Yep, we'll include those all in the show notes for easy access, so our audience can reach out to you, ask you any questions, and even perhaps invest. So, and that's obviously I'm not giving out any financial advice, but they're the details for our audience to get in contact and follow the news flows. So, all the best for the remainder of 2026, and good luck with going into first production in Q4.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. As always, appreciate if you can your continued support in this podcast. And as always, please share this episode far and wide. Obviously, gold is in the market at the moment, and it'd be good if you can share this amongst people within our industry, but also people outside of our industry, those that are just starting their education in gold. Alan's obviously given us an overview of a company that is going to be producing gold in the near future. So thank you again for listening, and until next time, happy mining.